A foundational flaw in Jordan Peterson's thinking is his criticism of terror management theory. And I will post a link in the description for those interested in the theory and the evidence for it. Jordan Peterson will say things like that death anxiety could not have been incorporated as the fundamental feature of human behavior because there are fates worse than death. Now, that shows great ignorance about evolution, because just because a predator, let's say, kills a prey with 10 times more pain than some other predator, that does not prove that that predator will have a greater effect on the behavior of the prey, because that predator may be scarce and the other predator may be much more numerous. Same as if a bird develops a special beak to pick seeds out of pine cones. There may be some other food in the environment that is more nutritionally dense. But if it's scarce, then it will not influence the formation of the beak as the pine cones did. Death is pervasive, happens to everybody, and yet fates that are worse than death are not as pervasive. So that generalizes. Then he will say things like, well, if death was the motivational factor behind religion, death anxiety, well, why is concepts of hell, why is such a concept so pervasive? After all, it is full of anxiety. Well, the answer is so easy, it is hard to think he didn't ponder on this, and that is that there's a very big problem of credibility with religion, and that is evil in the world. When you posit a loving God, when you posit all these features, you have to explain away the evil in the world. And so you rationalize it by positing a hell, positing free will between good and evil, and usually actually associating hell with things of the world, like the body, sexuality, and all that type of impermanent stuff, and associating heaven with the soul and other more lofty stuff. And another thing he'll say is, well, if death anxiety is so pervasive, well, why is it that people commit suicide? And, obviously terror management theory, for those who are familiar with it, has a very good explanation, which is that we gain our death anxiety reduction through the maintenance of our self-esteem, and that is gained through living up to the standards or even exceeding the standards of whichever culture we subscribe to. If we do not live up to those standards and we have a low self-esteem, that leads to the enhancement of the chances of suicide. His theory, which he subscribes to, doesn't have nearly as much evidence, and that is his complexity salience theory. The terror management theory that you can look up in the description will talk about the studies that for 30 years have been proving why it is that this is a fundamental feature of culture, and that is when you remind people of death, they strengthen their cultural beliefs, become more hostile to those who oppose their beliefs, and when you introduce doubt into their beliefs, when you take away the meaning or the strength of the meaning of their beliefs, more death thoughts crop to the mind, you get more death thought accessibility. So you have death thought accessibility and mortality salience studies, but you don't have complexity salience studies to back up Jordan Peterson's belief. It is simply armchair philosophizing without evidence to back it up. And it doesn't even make sense from a logical perspective, because he believes that our fear of complexity is the fundamental fear, and that death anxiety is just a subset of that complexity anxiety. And if that were the case, then you would expect that if we take away some of the complexity surrounding death, death would become easier to deal with. So if I were to tell you that I know for certain you'll die on this day at 5:15 p.m. and that you're certain to not have an afterlife, well, that I don't think brings about much comfort at all. So I just don't think that he knows very much about terror management theory, and that his perception either is skewed by ideology, or perhaps his intelligence is not being applied to this particular problem, not in an efficient manner, as far as I can see.